Hi, this is DarkFox127 and welcome back to another Skyrim Creation Kit tutorial video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to create your very own FOMOD installer. So if you don't know what a FOMOD installer is, it's essentially those little user interface boxes that you get appear whenever you're installing a mod with Mod Organizer or Vortex Mod Manager. And what they allow you to do is select different options for a mod. So maybe there's different color styles for something or anything along those lines, something that's a choice. And you also have things such as patches. So if you're installing a patch for needs mods, I need, realistic needs and diseases, it gives you an easy way to select the choices that you want and the patches that you want without having to shift through loads of different files or download multiple files off the Nexus. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make one of these for your own mod. So just to show you a good example of one of these FOMODs, I've got my new mod here, which is the Dark's main menu replacers. If it's not out at the time of this video, it will be out on the 11th, along with Anniversary Edition. And if I just go ahead and add this from my download section, just as if I downloaded it off the Nexus, what you get is one of these lovely screens that allows you to select from various different options and install patches. In this case, I don't have any patches. This is purely just options. So I've got standard or ultra wide. I'll go with standard. And I've got the background that I want. And when you hover over, you get a nice preview image, a description of what it is. You've got all this basic info at the top as well. And you can even change the name of the mod that's going to get installed. So I can click on Snow Ruins, Snow, next. And then I get one for music track. So you get different pages for different options, various different things. And I can click on Awake. And then when you install it, what it will do is it will take that initial download. I think this is about 40 meg, at least the beta of it is. And when you go into open it with File Explorer, you'll see that rather than the whole 40 meg, what it's done, it's picked out of that download everything that it needs, depending on what you've selected. So the music, it's got that one track that I asked for there. The meshes and the interface logo, it's got the right particle effects, the right NIF. You get the drift. It's installed the files that you've asked for without you having to sift through all of this stuff. Now, what you'll need is the FOMOD Creation tool. So this looks like it was initially created for Fallout 4. However, it does work for Skyrim Special Edition, and I would assume it would work, I don't see why it wouldn't, for Skyrim Anniversary as well. And what you'll need to do is go to the Files section here. I'll leave a link in the description down below. Hit the manual download button. I'll probably leave that alone because I've already got it installed, but you will need to go ahead and extract that. I would recommend a program like WinRAR or 7-Zip. I personally use the latter. And then you will need to place it somewhere safe, somewhere nice to dump it. So essentially I've put mine in my Skyrim directory under tools. And as you can see, I've got a load of other tools here. Lazy Voice Finder, Loot, NIF Scope I keep in here. It's very tidy, very easy to get to, and I've created a folder called FOMOD Creation Tool, and under here you'll see I've got docs, language, config, FOMOD, logo. All the parts to this program are in here, and I can just launch it from here. So that's just loaded on my second screen, because this one is not the primary, so I'll just drag that down. And as you can see, what you get is this nice user interface. It does look a little daunting at first, but don't worry, I'm going to cover the majority of it, at least what I know. There's a couple of things that I haven't really played around with, but I don't think are essential. And I'm going to guide you through how to use it. So yeah, don't be too worried about all of this here. It's a lot of boxes, a lot of options, but I'm going to run through it. Now, for the purpose of this video, I am going to be using the mod that I just showed you, the FOMOD installer for, as an example, as if I was making it from scratch. I'm not going to make the whole thing, I'd be here all day. But I am going to go through the majority of it and just explain each step as I go. But before we can get into that, the first thing that you need to do is kind of envision in your head or on paper or on a document how exactly you need your menu to be laid out. So what patches do you have? What options do you have? What pages do you want those to be on? Because what you'll essentially get is, as I showed you, different selections on different pages. So you could have a couple of sections on each page for music, for visual, all sorts of different things. So you're going to want to have a good idea of how you want those laid out. Also have a good think about what pictures you're going to need, because if you do want previews for things such as different barrel types, if it was a mesh replacer mod, or different textures, what pictures do you want? And you're going to need to get all of that stuff together before you can make the FOMOD. Otherwise it's going to be a lot of back and forth and resaving and opening your FOMOD and messing around. And what essentially you're going to need to do is decide on a structure of your FOMOD, get all the pieces of the puzzle together, all of the files as well, get those together, and you're going to need to put them into a folder structure that the FOMOD can point to that basically works for you. Now, essentially what I've done, or what I always do, is I've got in Documents, Mods here. This isn't my main PC, this is my streaming PC, so this is usually a bit different. But essentially what you're going to need is all of your files together, and as you can see I've got various different folders here laid out, and you're going to need something similar. Now I'm just going to make sure that all this is in a folder called FOMOD Installer. And what I do is I usually have this as my folder. It doesn't matter where it is. The tool is going to be able to essentially treat whatever directories you point at as the data folder. So it doesn't matter where it is on your computer. The FOMOD installer will make sense shortly. It is going to know where everything is, but we're just going to want one big folder where everything can sit. So I'm just going to make a copy of all of this. And yes, I am using Windows 11, but not for my main machine. I thought I'd sort of test it on this one. So if things look a bit weird with context menus, then that's why. But essentially what I've got here, I've got my different folders with all the different elements and the different files and the different sort of options that I'm going to need. So yours is going to look different depending on what it is. But the key one here that I've got is a folder called FOMOD. Now you will not need that to be there by default. That's the one that I've already created. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And all this needs to be in your FOMOD installer folder is everything that you're going to need. So I have different aspect ratios, meaning I've got a mesh for each aspect ratio for this mod. So if I double click into there, I've made a folder for standard and ultra wide. And if I click on standard, it's then as if the standard folder was the main data directory. So Skyrim data, your data folder. Essentially when I point to standard as an option for the aspect ratio, it's going to treat the standard folder as the Skyrim data directory, and it will do the same for ultra wide. Again, this will make sense shortly. Just make sure that essentially each option when you go into the folder is then going to be laid out as if it was in the data folder. So you can see I've got meshes, interface, logo, and then my logo NIF. That's exactly how you would see it in the data folder. And then if you go into ultra wide, you'll see I've copied the exact thing. So I've got meshes, interface, logo, logo NIF again. And then if we go back outside of aspect ratio, the next option that I have is the background. So I've got my standard backgrounds and my ultra wide backgrounds. So if I go into standard backgrounds, I've got a folder for each background. So here's the Hearthfire one. And again, it then treats the Hearthfire folder as the data directory. So I've got textures, interface, objects, main menu. And you can even see the pictures because I've got something installed called Sage Thumbs, which is a very good program just for sort of previewing things like it can even preview DDSs, which is nice in File Explorer. And then if we go to Mirac, you'll see textures, interface, objects, you get the drift. Each one of these folders is then acting as if it's the data folder. And then when we do use the tool, it will point at those areas and treat them as such. Hopefully that makes sense. It can be a little bit difficult to explain, but it will make more sense as you mess with it and as I create it going forward. So yeah, I'm not going to go through every one. It's basically how it's laid out. And then I've done the same for ultra wide. So you'll see same process. And each of my folders for each of my options has all that stuff. The next one is effects. So again, I've got none, smoke, snow. If you go into them, it's then laid out as it would in the data folder. Now, the other thing that I've got is tracks, so we'll ignore that. That's the same thing again. But the other one is images. So in images, I've got standard and ultra wide. So I've got all the images relating to standard and all the images relating to ultra wide. And then outside of that, I've also got a header image. The header image, Just pull that down from the second screen. That is just my show-off image. It's my kind of banner for the mod, essentially, and that's what can display when the menu first loads up. So I've got that in there, which is really neat. You can make these. You can even leave them. If you don't want any pictures, you just want the pure options, and you're not bothered about the presentation of things, you can actually just ignore images, but it will look a lot nicer, a bit more professional if you do have various images. And it does help if you've got to show different options. So if somebody's choosing between 3 different things, an image will help them know what they look like rather than having to install it, check it out in game, come back out. You get the drift. So essentially get everything laid out in here that you're going to need. And this mod doesn't have any sort of base files, if you will, so files that have to be there regardless of the options that you pick. But if you do have any base files, you can go ahead and make a folder in here called base files, put all of the essential files in there that have to be there regardless, and you can have an introduction page that essentially has a non-optional, mandatory kind of radio button for let's get the base files and then move on to the options. So you can do that if you like. But once I've got everything here that I need, that's the folder structure that I want. Again, this may be a little bit different for you, but what we can do now that we've got our images, we've got our options, our files, everything that we want, and it's all placed into a FOMOD installer, we can go ahead and open up the tool and start making the FOMOD. Okay, so I've gone ahead and loaded up the tool now that we've got our folder structure laid out and everything that we're going to need. And you'll be sort of presented with the mod info screen to begin with. This is where you can put all your basic information in for your mod. Relatively easy, quite self-explanatory. So the mod name in this case is going to be Dark's Menu Replacers. The mod author is going to be yourself, so in my case, DarkFox127. The mod version, this is going to be the second version. The mod page on the Nexus, you can head to Nexus and then just get the URL of your mod page. This means that if you've got something in the description that's referencing back to the mod page, it's going to give them a nice easy link. Just make sure that you get the one with just the number on the end, otherwise it'll send them to a specific post or whatever you had open on that mod page. So it's just nice and clean that way. And you'll also have mod category, so in this case I'm going to go with user interface. The mod header image, you can click on choose. Again, this is optional, you don't have to have pictures, but it is a lot nicer if you do. It's a lot more helpful as well. So if I go under images, I had my header image here. Click on open, so that's just to show off the mod, sort of present it nicely. And then mod description, put anything that you like in here really. It'd probably just be a copy of your description on the mod page. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just get the brief. Although I may need to update that before I release this. And then the root directory, this is going to be the main one. You remember that there was a FOMOD folder that we deleted previously? Well, that's what we're now essentially going to create. So if I click on open and just navigate to my FOMOD installer folder that I created, that I've got all of my folder structure in, you can click on that folder, the FOMOD installer, and do select folder. And what that will do, it will bring up an option for there is no FOMOD catalog in the specific directory. Create one? Yes. And what that will do, if we go into our FOMOD installer folder, you'll see that we've got a FOMOD folder. And if we go ahead and just click proceed to the next step, and then FOMOD at the top and save, you'll see that it creates 2 XML files. We open that back up. So we've got info and module config. Info is the one that you will use, that you will open up in this software if you need to come back and make changes later on. And it's made that, and then outside of it, it's got everything that it's going to need, and it's going to know where to look because we're going to specify everywhere that it needs to look within its FOMOD installer folder. So what you have next is steps. Steps I would refer more to as pages, essentially, different pages of the installer. So if I say pages, then I basically mean steps. If I say steps, it's essentially a page. So you've got different steps. You'll have different ones appear as you go along. So if I go next step, you'll see every time you click it, you get another page, another page, another page. I'm not entirely certain if there are any limits to the amount of pages, but you might want to just try and fit as many groups as you can on each page in whatever way makes sense. If you do find that you've got a very large FOMOD installer, so if you've got a lot of options, a lot of patches and whatnot, I've seen pretty large mod configuration menus in the past. So you've got your pages, and then on your pages, you've got your groups. So what I mean by groups, just to give you a visual representation, if I go to reinstall this, a group is essentially, let's go to the next step. It's essentially what's in each of these boxes labeled as effects or background. Each one of these is a group, so it's a selection of options. And then you've got the options themselves. So that's essentially what a group is. So under here, what I want to do in this case is I want to name the step, first of all. You'll remember that I mentioned that you could have an introduction with base files. Let's assume that we had some base files. I would do a first step name of base files, or better yet, introduction. Hold on just one second. Sorry to interject, just something that I need to mention that's quite important that I forgot to put in, I've just remembered while editing, is do not use any special characters, so things like @signs, dashes, underscores, anything like that, or you'll find out the hard way that it does break the FOMOD installer. These characters must just be used in the actual code somewhere, which can confuse things. So essentially, don't use any special characters and you should be good to go. All right, you can carry on. Name would be the base files. And I would say select all. So the type here is essentially how this group is going to react. What's it going to allow you to select? Will it allow you to select all of them, one of them, at least one? They're all pretty self-explanatory in there. And what you'll do is, in this case, I'll say select all. It's non-optional. That's what it's going to do. And you'll add it in. And don't worry about what it says along the top here. These are like the sort of active live things that you're typing and selecting in. What's in here is what's been added up to this point. And you can right click and edit the name of the type if you do make any mistakes. So you see the name, the type, if you do need to change it, rather than have to remove it and all that stuff. And if you've added multiple in and they're not in an order that you like, you can just go ahead, move them up, move them down, do whatever you need with them. So that's your base files. And then what you would do is go ahead and add what is called a plugin name. To get this to add in, you'll have to select the group that you want. So you're going to see this change depending on the group that you select. So if I put Boo, and I've got two groups, and then in the base files I put Essential. That's just a name. It could be anything that you want. And then if I click on Boo, you'll see Essential's gone. So this is your group, your options for that group. This is your other group, your options for that group. And I could put stuff, more stuff. And as you can see, you've got your different options for each group that you've got. So I remove that from there. And then what you would do is, we'll ignore this section for a moment, but to have this do what it needs to do, you could do a description. So when you select each group or each option more specifically, so this will be for every plugin name. Don't worry, they don't have to be plugins. They can be meshes, textures, whatever they are. They've just called it plugin name for some reason. It should be more like option name. But when you click on your option, it will allow you to type in a description for each. So all the essential, oh God, I can't type today. Essentials that you need are here. Must have this ticked. If I could spell. There we go. So you type a description in. Again, if you had more stuff, you can see when you click on it, you get a description for each one. So you give it a description. You can do an image. So when you click on each option, you've got a different image for it. So I could just do header image again if I wanted for essential. And then when you click on each option, the image will change. That's essentially what it will do. In this case, I'm not going to do that. And then you'll see at the bottom here, you've got files and you've got data. I'm not sure what copy this does. It's probably as it sounds. It probably copies a particular set of files or folder in a certain path. But the one that I tend to use is data. So it's whatever folder that you're going to be treating as the data folder to pull the files from and add into what it's essentially compiling as the mod that you'd like. So you remember when I said that the folders were going to be treated as data folders? This is what I meant. So if we click on add file at the bottom there, and let's say that we did have a collection of base files, and we did what I mentioned earlier on, and we had a base files folder, and in here you'd have your meshes, your textures, everything that are non-optional that you have to have. You'll essentially me do that again. Instead of add file, you would add folder, because you would want everything in the selected folder of base files. Select the folder, and what it would do, it would pull everything in that folder in and use that as the base set of files, the first set. And then with all of these options, in all of these pages, all of these groups, anything that's added into here, it's going to be adding on top. And eventually, you'll wind up with a completed package, depending on what you selected. So that includes your base files, your options, your patches, everything that you asked for is all going to be in there. Now in this case, I'm not actually creating a mod that has base files. Everything pretty much just changes depending on the options that you pick, in terms of I've got no base files, so I'm going to remove that, but that's what you would do if you did have a collection of files that were non-mandatory. So I'm just going to wipe all of this stuff out, and I'm going to sort of start fresh with what I want for my aspect ratios, and show you the next bit that you may or may not need to do. So instead, what I've got for this particular mod is I have screen configuration. So screen configuration, oh, that's not my group name, sorry, that's my step. So my first step is screen configuration, and then I have my aspect ratio that I want the user to choose. And I'm going to go ahead and say that you have to select at least one aspect ratio. So it's one or the other. Hit add. And then that means the little radio buttons that you get, it will force you to select only one. It won't let you click multiple. And then what I'll do is in plugin name, I'll say 16:9. I actually typed this up a lot cleaner for my own sort of finished product, but just for speed's sake, I'm just going to type it shorthand. So I've got 16:9, 21:9, standard aspect ratio, and then we'll put ultra wide coolness. Oh yeah. So you'll see the description is different depending on what you select. I've got standard aspect ratio, so my picture is going to be back in the files here. I'll delete base because we're not going to need that for this mod. And under my images, I've got standard. And then under here, I have basically any one that I want to select. So I will use Mirac. And you'll see you've got your image there. It shows you a preview. And then 21:9, I'll go under ultra wide, and I'll select the same one, but it will show it you stretched. Now you won't see it here because it's going to show it in the same size box, but when you do go in, as you saw earlier on, assuming you didn't skip that part of the video, it did actually adjust it and sort of change the visual of the image, which is really cool. So you get to see what it looks like both ways and what it's going to look like for your aspect ratio. So I've got my aspect ratio choices. And what you would do next is essentially create a new step, another step, however many steps that you need, or pages in this case. You can delete steps as well if you don't want them. But what I want to do is, rather than just go to the next step, I need to be able to choose which step I'm going to. So if you have sort of conditions, and this needs to change based on what you select. So essentially it's going to be branches coming off of a tree. It's going to go in separate directions depending on your choices. Then you're going to need to use flags and conditions. So although you may not need this for a mod that you're planning on making a FOMOD for, I would hang around for this little bit of the video just to learn how these work, just in case in the future you do come across this and you do need to branch off your mod configuration menu. But I imagine most people may not need to do this. But essentially for my 16:9, it's going to go with the smaller images, and for the 21:9, I need it to go to another section where it's laid out pretty much the same, but with different preview images and different files that are selected, because I use a different mesh for each aspect ratio. So what I do is I select my first one, my 16:9. Again, you can edit these if you've made a mistake, or double click them. But I'll click my 16:9, and then on this right hand side that we sort of ignored earlier on, you'll see that you've got flag set and plugin dependencies. Now plugin dependencies are going to be where it checks for active plugins and makes recommendations or autofills radio buttons depending on what's installed in your plugins. And your flag set is what we're going to make use of here, which basically sets a flag depending on the option you select, which the next step is going to run a condition against and see which one it should be going to. Hopefully that makes sense. So for the flag set, essentially what you're going to do, it's similar to the boxes up here where it's got live data and you make it up and you add it in. And we're going to do that here. So for the flag name, I'm going to use standard, or standard apparently, standard, and set. And then you've got different options: on, off, active, inactive, missing. I'm going to set this as a flag for active and click add. And you'll see that standard equals active. That's what it's setting my flag to that I'm going to refer to in my next step. And then I'll do 21 by 9, and I'm going to add the same one, but this one is going to set it as inactive. So what I want to do now is go new step. I've already done that, so I've got a step 2 here. And when you click on step 2, it's going to empty everything out. It's still going to have these live text fields filled in, but don't worry about that. There's nothing in the boxes. It's all plain, ready to go again. And I'm just going to save at this point, just in case of any issues. That's going to resave the XML files and whatnot. I'd recommend doing this after sort of each page or step or set of groups, anything that's taken you a while to do, just in case. I've not experienced any problems with the program or crashing, but you never know. You don't want to lose all this stuff. It does get quite confusing. So under step name, the next step for this is going to be customization. I don't actually remember what I put it as, the second step. Let me just check. It's going to eat me up inside otherwise. But I did... I can't even see it. I think it was just, I had the group names, menu selector, that was it. And then I had music selector. So let's stick with it just for argument's sake. So let's do menu selector. And what we'll do is the different groups that I had. So I've got the wallpaper first. And I'm going to allow you to select exactly one. Again, you might have something where you're adding different potions into the game and you want the user to be able to select the different potions that they want to add. So you could do select all, you could do select any. If it was an option between, say, 5 different potions and they can put them all on if they wish, or if they have to have at least one of them but can add more, you can select the different options that you need here for the type. In my case, I'm going to say just the one, and I'm going to go ahead and add that group. And for that group, I'm going to have my different options. So I'm not going to add them all. I'll be here all day, but I'm going to put Dragonborn and Mirak just for this one. And then again, for each one, Dragonborn's nice face. I don't know. Again, not doing a very good job of typing. Dragonborn's nice face. Mirak's ugly face. So again, it's just a description. And then for Dragonborn, I can choose my image. This is where it's going to get interesting. So my first menu selector, I've decided that this is going to be the ultra wide selection. So under my images ultra wide, I'm going to do Dragonborn, and I will get to those conditions in a moment. So for this Mirak one, I'm going to do the Mirak one, and you can start to see where this is going to go in a moment. And for my my files, I'll come back to plugin dependencies. We're focusing purely on stuff where it's just file management and it's not looking for ESPs. It's pure choice here. So I don't need to do anything with the flag set here. These aren't setting flags. And what I'll do is under the data for my files. So for the Dragonborn file, I'm going to do add a folder. It could be an individual file. If it's an individual file, add file by all means. And I'm going to go under the wallpaper that we're selecting. So I'll do ultra wide backgrounds, and I'm looking for Dragonborn. And this is what I'm going to treat as my data folder. So I'm going to go on this one and go ahead and select folder. And I'm going to do the same for Mirak. So this is going to add the folder of Mirak. I don't know. There we go. We've got Dragonborn and Mirak in there, and those are adding the different files from the specified folders. And then where it gets interesting is because I want to make sure that you can only select these groups and options in this menu selector if you've got ultra wide. And just to make this clearer for users and even for me, I could do ultra wide in brackets for the name. Obviously, if you went ahead in screen config and selected 16 by 9, you shouldn't be reaching this menu. So this is where we're going to make use of the flag. And under conditions, we are going to find the flag, should be in the list, which it is standard, and it's going to be equal to, and it needs to be inactive. because standard was going to be active, ultra wide was going to be inactive. So I want to check for that. And that means that as long as you selected the ultra wide option, so standard was false essentially, then this page will show. And all you'll do, you've guessed it, you'll do the opposite of that and you'll check that it was active for the next selection. Now, I'm not sure if you can copy these. I don't think you can copy steps, which is quite frustrating. But essentially what you'll do is exactly the same layout, but with slightly different images and different folders selected for the next page. So I'll go ahead and do that really quickly. Obviously, I've got more options than this and more files and whatnot, but just for the sake of the video. So we'll do menu selector and we'll do standard. And then I would do wallpaper, select exactly one. I'm going to go ahead and re-add Mirror and Dragonborn. I want to move that one up because that was higher up. I want the image, but this time I'm going to do the standard backgrounds and it's going to be Dragonborn. Oh, no, I'm in the wrong place. Hang on a minute. It's going to be images, standard. And then I'll pick the Dragonborn and then do the same for Mirror. And you'll see I've got the standard ones now that will show for these. And then I could do the descriptions again, but I'm just going to type gobbledygook in because I can't be bothered. And then the condition under this one is going to be standard is equal to active. And again, you've got operators, so you can do ands or ors. So if it needs to check, if it gets really complex and it needs a number of flags to be ticked, like you select standard and something else for this to show, or so if it's like either one of certain options, you get the idea. It's just basic conditions that have to run. Again, most of you won't need that, but you'll select all of that. So essentially, if I do 16 by 9, it's going to go to standard, and if I do the 21 by 9, it's going to hop over to ultra. And then each of these is then going to progress on to the next step. So the next step is where we get into what most of you are going to be using, which is the plugin dependencies. Now for this mod in particular, I don't have any plugin dependencies, but I'm going to go along with it and pretend that I do. So the step name for this, I believe, for each of these as well, I also had an additional group, for effects. So each of these would also add effects. So I'd do effects, I'd put my different effects in there for none, for smoke, and also for snow. Oh, I removed the smoke. There we go. Smoke in there as well. And then you'd click on each of these, give them a description, select the folder that they're in for each of them. You get the idea, hopefully. So then eventually I would lead on to, say, my music step. And it's what I was just thinking about something. I just sort of froze up. There we go. So I'll do my music step next. And let's say that my music options were dependent on various plugins being enabled. So I'm going to put track. I think it was actually music selector. So we'll do track. So my group, and my only group for this one is going to be track. Again, select exactly one. And then I'm going to have different options. So let's put default in, awake, and the other one was Sovereign Guard. So you see, as you get the hang of it, it becomes quite easy, easy enough to sort of do and piece stuff together. And again, default, this is an interesting one because I'm just going to go with whatever vanilla is. I don't want to overwrite any files, meaning I just leave the destination path at the bottom here, where I would usually add a file or folder. Just leave it blank, and then it won't add any files for this section, and then it will just use vanilla. So that's what you'll do if you don't want anything. Awake, do add folder, just to show you again how this works. So I'd go under my music, so it's my tracks, awake, and select folder. So it will follow through all of this and put the music folder and everything contained within it inside of it. And then what if awake was dependent upon a particular mod being installed? So let's just say Riverside Shack, one of my player homes, needed to be installed for this. So rather than mess around with flags, we don't need that now. Instead, we've got plugin dependencies. Now you've got a default type name, which, as it suggests, is sort of the default. But essentially what a type name is this essentially is what it sets the radio option to sort of act as. So it sets the behavior of the radio option, whether it's an optional, whether you can't change it, whether it's sort of recommended, can be used, cannot be used, whether it ticks it, doesn't tick it, depending on if it sees that a plugin that you state is available or not. So the example that I'm going to use here, and I'm not going to go through all of these, what I would recommend, because I have not used all of these myself, but mess around with them, use different ones, see how they react. But what this is going to do is it's going to check for various sort of ESPs and any conditions that you set, and based on that it's going to change what the toggle, the radio button toggle for awake, does, depending on if it's found it or not. So it's going to be what it does in different scenarios, essentially. So for the first one, I'll go could be usable is what I use if it's detected something. It will automatically tick it if it finds this ESP. And what you can do is, I think it's click new pattern, essentially. Yeah, new pattern. And you can have different patterns. So for different scenarios, it does a different thing. So pattern 0, I would recommend being the scenario of what if it's there and active in your load order. And then pattern 1 would be what if the stated ESP isn't there. So for pattern 0, I'll do type name saying that it could be usable because it's there, and pattern 1 being it's not there, so it's not usable. I mean, you can always tick these anyway, but it's just what it does by default, just to give a sort of visual indicator and recommendation, if you will, of what the user should do. So the user's got realistic needs and diseases installed, for example. There's a patch for it in this FOMOD, and this can detect realistic needs and diseases, and it ticks it by default to suggest to the user, you've got this, you might want to use this patch, and it's up to them if they do or not. So for this, not usable. Then what you'll do is file or flag name. This is where you need to type the exact name of the ESP. You can also utilize flags, so these can appear or disappear depending on flags that you've set. So this traces back to that conditional stuff. But in this case, what we'll do under pattern, where we've put could be usable, this is where we're going to say if Riverside Shack .esp, and you'll need to make sure you've got the .esp or it's not going to work, state is active, so is it active in my load order, then I'm going to make it a could be usable, and I'm going to add that in. And again, you've got different states, so different states that it checks against. Is it on? Is it there but off? Is it active in your load order? Is it in your load order but inactive? Is it missing completely? These are like the sort of conditions, essentially. A little bit confusing, but if you look at other mod configuration menus and mess around with your own, if you're a bit confused by it, you'll sort of start to figure it out as you mess around with it. So the other pattern, so the other situation, the different scenario, so patterns you can think of as scenarios. So what to do when it's there, and this is going to be what to do when it's not there. So I'm going to do what do you do if the Riverside Shack ESP is missing. Then it's going to become not usable. It's going to leave it unticked because it's going to be, well, I don't see that you've got that mod. This patch probably isn't needed. And again, you can do other things. You can have it as required. So if it finds that the ESP is there under pattern 0, then it could be required. And it ticks it. It's like, nope, it's there. You have to use it. But usually you want to give the user the option because it could have a sort of, not so much a false positive, but there could be something there that it thinks that you need it, but you don't actually need it. So what I'll do here is remain as it could be usable if it's active. So it's really cool. It's basically just reading your mod manager's load order and going, I can see that's there. You should use this. And you can do that. Obviously, it changes again for different ones. So it'll set this information for each option that you select. So Sovereign Guard, if I wanted to make sure that Millwater Retreat was active or something, for that to be available or whatnot, then I could go ahead and do that. And then you can, again, add as many steps as you want. Or if you don't add any more steps, that's going to mean that it's basically finished. So I'm going to go ahead, click Save. Let that do its thing. Again, this is going to be all a bit of a mess because I haven't really done an awful lot with it, but I will again sort of show you a couple of mod configuration menus that I've made and kind of refer back to this stuff at the end of the video so you can get an idea of what these different options have essentially done. So let's go ahead and test this mod configuration, not mod configuration, what am I talking about? FOMOD tool. let's go ahead and test the FOMOD tool in Mod Organizer, see how it works. Okay, so the one bit that I forgot to mention, which is quite important, is how do you package your mod up when it's in a FOMOD installation setup. So what you need to do is just highlight everything in your FOMOD installer folder and then add it into an archive. So in my case, I use 7-zip, add to archive, and then it's gone on my second screen again. Give it a name, click OK. I've already done that, so I'll hit cancel, and then I've got my install there, and then I just load up Mod Organizer and then just install the mod. So double click it, and you'll see that I get my nice FOMOD menu here with the various different options, 16:9, 21:9, and because we name them quite nicely, so you remember those flags that we set to check which option I've chose. So if I do 16:9, the flag for standard was set to true, or active I believe it was. Then it's gone straight to standard because it's ran that condition. And if I click next, it proceeds onto music selector. So it completely skipped out the ultra wide page or step. And then if I go back and do 21:9, and you'll see that the image is changing depending on the one that we selected as well. And the description's changed. And we click next, I went straight to the ultra wide page or step, which is really nice. And then next, off to menu selector. The other thing that we did was we did a plugin dependency. That's not really how I would have wanted it to react. I'd want it to react so that you could still tick it if you wanted to. So again, you'll need to play around with those options a little bit and choose the ones that work for you. Just quickly repackage it and retest it. When you first make a FOMOD, and maybe after you've made a few of them, as you can see, you might have to do a little bit of trial and error and tweaking different options and conditions and dependencies to see what happens with it. But essentially, I imagine what would happen, or what I know would happen, if that had detected Riverside Shack in this case, which isn't installed on my streaming PC that I'm doing this video on. If Riverside Shack was installed, it would have actually ticked that option for me and allowed me to use it, which is really cool. I imagine this might be to do with the fact that I said select exactly one. If I said that you could select any, which I probably should have done, then that would have just been unticked. So again, you've got to mess around with the options, see what different things do, and roll with it. But what I'll do now, I'll go ahead, I'll install a couple of my own mods with my own FOMODs, and I'll show you a couple of examples of how these things can function. Okay, so although that is pretty much it for how you create FOMODs and get them installed into your sort of mod manager, I'm now going to go through a couple of examples of my own mods just to kind of better link up what we've just done and explain exactly what we've been doing for those of you that may have a little bit more trouble kind of grasping the concept of them. Again, it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and eventually you should get the swing of things. With a couple of rewatches. I know it's been a long video, so feel free to stop the video here if you think that you've got the hang of it, you want to give things a try. Otherwise, hang around if you want me to further kind of link together what we've been doing with what I'm about to show you here. So I've gone ahead and installed, well, downloaded, I'm going to install A Cat's Life from the Skyrim Nexus. And to go back to what we were doing, as you can see, I've got all the information here, author name, version number, link back to the mod page. Be aware that you might want to make sure that goes to the right mod page and have two different variants of your FOMOD if you've got like a legacy version and a special edition. But here I've got the description. I've even got some instructions, sometimes a good idea to include in there. And as you can see, I've got a base files, which is absolutely mandatory. You can't change it, you can't do anything with it. You have to click next. We've also got the preview image, just a header image. You can click on these and make them bigger if you've got the latest version of MO as well. And if you click on next, you'll see that again we've got descriptions for each of these as I hover over. These are actually patches with different groups for the various different mods. So groups are good to assign to different mods sometimes. And we've got Better Roads all in one, Better Roads Whiterun, Better Roads and Bridges complete version, as that mod has various different versions. I've used the same image for a few of these because it doesn't really change in terms of how it looks. It's just dependent on the ESP that you've got. And yeah, so you can see that these were marked up. I haven't got Better Roads installed, so it's selected none. And I don't have any needs mods installed, so it's selected none. If I did have any of these, same with Open Cities, then what it would do is it would select the relevant one automatically, and then you could still go ahead and change that if you wanted to, which is really, really useful. So I would select the patches that I want, or in this case, none of them, and just go ahead and click install. And that would go on there. And then again, if I open it up, you'll see that there won't be any patches in here, just the normal BSA and ESP from the main files. But if I do a reinstall and I run through it and pretend that I do have some patches, various mods, do replace, open that in Explorer, you'll see that it's gone ahead and added the ESPs, which are also marked up as ESLs, which is really neat. And then I think I showed it previously, but I'll show it you again, the initial menu replacer, the kind of beta for this that's coming out. And if I do my standard, goes to the standard option. We can tell because the images. If I do my ultra wide, this was dependent on the flag again that was set. It's gone to ultra wide. And then I've also got my effects. So I'm going to do standard, mountains, snow, next. And it's just adding files on files on files until it's packaged together exactly what you want. So I'll do awake. Again, the images are changing. All the info is on there. Click install. Tick that box. And then I'm going to load it up. I haven't got Steam started, interestingly. So I'll just get Steam up and running. And there we go. That should be running now. Let's load up the game. And as you can see, it's got exactly what I asked for. It's got the menu that I wanted, the background, it's got the effects that I wanted, and you should probably also be able to just about hear the music that I requested as well. So it all clings together. And then if I was going to go in and show you that Cat's Life was active, but it's obvious that it's going to be active because it's in the file options. And then again, I do have some other mods with FOMODs. But hopefully that video is useful to you all. Hopefully it made sense. It covered a lot of sections and whatnot. There are a couple of things in there that I haven't really toyed with before that you may notice that I never covered. But for most of you, this is all that you're going to need, whether you're just doing patches or various file options. And if you need to sort of split it out and go to different pages or steps, whatever you want to call it, depending on the options that you select. So hopefully you found this video useful. Please let me know in the comments section down below. I would like to know if any of you have managed to make your FOMODs with this, if it's helped you out in some way. Please also hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. You can check out the website at www.darkfox127.co.uk if you want to know more about my mods work and everything else in general. Otherwise, that is just about it from me. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll speak to you next time.